smartest guys around are about to
attempt to break it down.
like they won the game a million times.
Well, actually, they didn't really win the game at all.
Survivor know it all. Survivor know it all. Steven Rock without a doubt got the game all figured out. They know it all.
Yes, that is right. We are live. The livest we've ever been here after what an episode of Survivor Stephen Fishback.
Wow, what a crazy episode. What a fun, phenomenal, wild tribal council. So much happened. The game shifted upside down. And most importantly, Rob, I just want to take a moment here at the start of the podcast to marinate in my
How'd
extreme...
that go for you last time?
Yeah, I do love good marinating.
It's going to be similar tonight.
It's so rare in this life that we take a stance. We are shouted by our, whatever you are. And literally the next week, we are completely 100% vindicated.
You are so predictable. You're so predictable. You're such a petty, results-oriented man. And
this is not about results. This is not about results-oriented.
We'll talk about it all here tonight. Really excited for this one, Stephen. Really excited to have you here with us, either live or if you're listening to the podcast. We're happy that you're checking us out as well. It's going to be a very fun show tonight. Get your questions in. Hashtag RHAP. Another jam-packed week. T-Bird is going to be my guest on the recap podcast. Eric Stein this weekend on the voicemails. And then I'll check in with Kurt Clark on This Week in Survivor before we get to the Wiggle Room coming up later. And then this is, get ready for this, Stephen, because we are going to have bonus coverage tonight. For the first time ever, we are going to do a live Survivor Know-It-Alls after show. This is we're already a Survivor after show. We're going to have a Know-It-Alls after show on an app called Fan Cred. We're going to give this a shot, and you, the viewer, are going to have the opportunity to call in and talk to Stephen and I live. That is not part of this podcast. That will get off the ground around 10:15 tonight. Go to fancred.com to get the app and watch us live. And then what you need to do is go to the on-air section and click on the show. All right, look for Survivor. Add it as a team on fancred.com when you get the app. Okay.
This is a great week for it too. I mean, this was by.
Perfect
I guess
week.
we knew this was promoted as a big episode, but it really was the right week to have an extra time here because there's so much to talk about. It was quite confusing, and as I said, it would be really fun for all of us together to marinate in how wrong you were.
Okay. And as you talk about your marinating, let's also give a special congratulations to the man you originally marinated in stealing his vote, Joe Anglum. He and Sierra Dawn Thomas are engaged. Congratulations.
I'm so happy for Joe.
My
He's
mom
such a
is
good
thrilled.
guy.
My mom was texting me this morning. Did you hear about Joe and Sierra?
Does some part of you is sad that we missed an incredibly rare opportunity for a full Murphy?
Full Murphy. But when Joe ultimately ends up, then he will then stump for somebody in the final tribal council and propose. Yeah, a full Murphy perhaps. But when Joe's winning the season, then I guess that this would be, or if he loses the season, I guess that's the Rob Mariano to lose and then propose.
Yeah. It's such, I mean,
So many ways
good
you
for
could
him
go.
for not doing that. Like, I do feel like the temptation would have been there for anyone who was about to get married to be like, but the Survivor finale is so close. So good on him for not doing that. However, full Murphy, something to consider for all you future players.
Yes. Okay. For another time, let's explore that more. But Steven, let me turn the floor over to you to give your stump speech of why everything that happened tonight was a direct result of last week's blunder.
So basically, I mean, this is sort of the core issue of why when you're in that majority alliance, and if you turn on them this early in the game, you become incredibly vulnerable because your old allies, not only do they not trust you anymore, but they're furious at you. They want revenge. And I think Julie is the best example of that. She's like running up and down tribal council saying, I want to jump ship. I want to jump ship. And I don't think that's just like one erratic lady being kind of crazy. I think that is like the core emotional response from everyone who's in that, who has that experience of like, my alliance just turned on me. They pulled the wool out from under me. I don't feel safe anymore in this game. The people who were my enemies are still my enemies, but the people who were my allies, I don't trust anything that they're saying. Like, let me not only like seek out safety elsewhere, let me screw you over by going against you. Like, there's nothing that I think nothing stings harder than betrayal. And then on the other side of the, so that's like Julie and the Ron of it all. And on the other side of it, you have the Lesu 3 who they no longer need you. Your new allies, they don't necessarily need you anymore. And they don't trust you either because they know that you're untrustworthy. So you have all of the, and I think like Kelly is the perfect example of that. I'm really curious to think what you think that the comma plan actually was. But Kelly, in every glance, she's like, I think they're out to get me. I think they're out to get me. Gavin is looking the wrong way. Kelly's like, I think he's out to get me. Julia like smiles too big at her, and she's like, I think they're out to get me. And my read on it is that they actually were not out to get her, that they were on her side, but because of the paranoia of the situation that they created, now nobody trusts them anymore, and everyone wants them out.
That's interesting. My read on what was going to happen had the vote gone as scheduled was that I had thought that Kama had gotten back together and was going to vote out Kelly Wentworth. That was my presumption in terms of how the vote would have unfolded had things gone according to plan at that tribal council.
So I'm totally not sure if it would have been Kelly or if it would have been David. The only argument
this is interesting. I hadn't even considered that maybe that they were going with a different plan. I had assumed Kelly too, and I honestly I'm not even sure it matters which one it is, but then when Julia kind of used that opportunity at Tribal to reassure Kelly, hey, I'm just telling Kelly that we're with her. It's possible that was misdirection, but if that was misdirection, that was really dumb because it just made everyone else freak out. Yeah, I think it was an attempt at misdirection. I think it was an attempt at, no, Kelly, everything is good. Relax. You're fine. Right. You're fine tonight. Don't worry. Yeah. Okay. So
I believe that.
Steven, you make a lot of good points about why Kama should have stuck together, which is why last week I was not I love this move, but also there's no safe moves here in Survivor 38. Sure, certainly in the Middle Ages of Survivor, in the early days of Survivor, stick with your numbers. There's safety there. But we're in a time and a place where you have the comma 6. We're down to 11 now. Aurora's got an extra vote. That the numbers are very fickle in terms of.
I don't want to re-legislate last week.
So what I want to say here tonight is that throw last week out the window. I think that these people who made this move tonight, or I'm sorry, the people who made that move last week, played this round poorly. Not necessarily that what they did last week was bad now. I think that what they did last week was still fine. I think that they really mishandled this round of voting because what they ended up doing was that they made the move last week, but then they could not get back on the same page about what they wanted to do this week. So even if you make the right move last week, but don't follow it up with the next right move, then it doesn't matter because the whole thing ended up collapsing back in on itself. And the game, as Dr. Mike pointed out in my podcast with him this week, you, as the father of voting blocks, should now certainly be able to see where this game is right now, where we totally ended up in voting block Survivor, where you had the 4 people from Comma that flipped last week, the Lesu 3, David and Devins, and then Ron and Julie. And the problem was that you had this group that flipped, that they ultimately did not make either Ron and Julie feel great, and they did not make the Lesu 3 feel great. So it set up this position where this is almost like a supersized version of what happened with Christy Smith, of all the other voting blocks got together and said, hey, let's vote out the swing alliance, not the swing vote. And had they been able to get on the same page, those 4 people, and make the compelling case either to the Lesu 3 or to Ron and Julie, where I really believe that they were planning on voting with Ron and Julie, but because of that betrayal, and then also because that they were not on the right page with them, or could not make them feel good enough about what they were doing, the whole thing ended up falling apart. And they also did not include Devins or David Wright in anything that they were planning. So you had Rick Devins, who had a great episode this week, being the person who was really stirring it up at that tribal council.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I again, like, I don't want to get and legislate last week. I guess my fundamental feeling about that is that was an essential issue of last week's move, is that by doing that, they basically had inevitably laid these seeds. And that's why we see the same thing happen again and again. I mean, it's one of the very few reliable principles of Survivor that, this is the whole, philosophical basis behind the idea of an intentional Mat Singh, is that when you have a giant group, a big tribe that doesn't really go to tribal council before the merge in any significant way, they inevitably turn on each other, and it inevitably leads to the entire collapse. So, I hear you that, like, there were better ways to play this, and I agree. I think we should talk about how they screwed up and how they could have maybe saved themselves. But I also think that level of betrayal and mistrust, it just is something that was inevitable based on their decision last week. That said, maybe there was a different path. Maybe there was a different path for them here. And I'm curious, like, what do you think? How should they play that?
Okay.
What do Gavin and Julia do?
So we came into the episode and Gavin says, hey, so I've got my 3 of, okay, so it's myself and Julia and Victoria, and I think we should stick with the 3 people we voted with in last week. That's the move. I think that we should do that. And I think that had they stayed the course, I think that Lesu 3 would have stuck with this 3. And that was the plan to ultimately take out David Wright. Now, ultimately, David Wright is going to play an idol in this episode of television. So again, there is no perfect plan for this group in terms of this choose your own adventure story. But but I do think that 6 would have held going into this vote of 11, and I think that Aurora ultimately is going to stick with that group of 3 that she voted with at last week's tribal council. But then there is this talk where we're seeing Julia saying, like, hey, well, this group of 3 now, I don't know if I trust them. And I think that they need to pick a lane in terms of, are we picking off the comma people? We're going to turn on the people that we just voted with at the last vote? To me, I think that's a little too all over the place now to go back to, Tony Vlachos can pull it off. But I think that was too much to flip to go and vote with Lesu and now go away from them and then vote out Lesu, where I think that if they would have stuck with Kelly and War Dog and Lauren And we even saw that conversation where they would have been up to vote together again and vote out Ron Clark in this episode. There's a part where Lauren says, hey, well, David has no allies, but Ron is connected to a lot of people. What do you say the six of us vote out Ron? And they hedge, and they're going back and forth, this group. They don't make up their mind. They don't make either side feel great. And I think that's what opened them up to be vulnerable at this tribal council.
But so you're saying like when the lesser of three is like, hey, let's vote out Ron, they should be like all in favor of that. But I think this is like the fundamental problem here is that they have put themselves in this position where they don't have a numerical advantage here, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's four of them, there's five Lessus who do, they have we, the viewer, right? We see it as it's three Lessus and it's two Lessus, but like from their perspective, like, hey, these guys were together for a long time. They could vote together just as easily as we voted together last week. Mm-hmm. So, so when the Lessus are saying to them like, hey, why don't we take out Ron instead of David? Like, I would be nervous if I were them too. Now that doesn't necessarily mean like that they have to flip, but it's not a crazy idea for them to kind of try to pull back the commas. I actually think that might've been the stronger move, where if they go to the commas and say something like, hey, we have always been together. Eric was squirrely. Like he was the problem. We knew he was plotting too much. We're tight. This wasn't about you guys. I just don't think they did that sort of damage control. You saw that with the conversation between Ron and Gavin, where Ron is like, what the heck? And Gavin's like, yeah, I took I did it. And, he did.
So that move would be okay also, but they could not execute on that either because they had too many plans going on where they're trying to, now they're flirting with the Lesu 3 and we believe that they were going to vote with Ron and Julie, but Julie that Julie was so upset from the previous vote that nobody was able to be the Julie whisperer and get her back to feeling good enough that she was ready to vote with them, to the point that she just explodes the tribal council like, I'm ready to jump ship. Gavin was trying to talk to her at one point. She's like, oh, you're not swearing, you're not going to vote me out. And so they made her upset by flipping against her last week, but nobody did a good job of reeling them back in and assuring them. And also, this whole group does a really bad job. Even if that was their plan, let's vote out Kelly Wentworth. There's that great scene, the pot scraping scene, where Victoria is cleaning the pot and there's no score. And we're sort of like Kelly Wentworth POV inside of Kelly Wentworth's head. And Julia's like giving her like thumbs up tonight, and she's like, why is Julia giving me a signal? And Gavin's not looking at her, and everybody's acting weird. And so I think there's probably a pretty good chance that Kelly Wentworth goes on to play her idol at this tribal council. So even if we see Kama become reconstituted here, and then they voted for Kelly Wentworth, she ends up playing her idol. And this is like they're just too all over the place. And I also feel like that the debate between Gavin and Gavin and Julia over should we vote out Kelly Wentworth or should we vote out David Wright also contributes to some of the problems for this group, because I think that also prevents them from being more all in with any particular side, because amongst themselves, they're not on the same page about who their target is going to be.
But this isn't like some, random thing. It's always the case, right? When someone who has not had power before gets power and then immediately squabbles break out. It's like a historical precedent, not just in Survivor, but in like history, right? Where people who like newly come into power, suddenly like strife breaks out between that group and factions develop and they have trouble executing on power. It's interesting to think about the tribal council that might have been, because we know for sure that David was planning. I mean, for sure, right? We know that David and Rick were planning on playing their idol on David. I think no matter what Kelly is feeling, when she sees David play an idol, she 100% has to play an idol. I mean, she did it in Cambodia with Jeremy, but I think in this case, she knows. And so then suddenly, I think we were in store for a crazy tribal council no matter what tonight.
No matter what. All right,
Yeah.
well, let's talk about the actual tribal itself, because this was really all hell broke loose tonight, and that I feel like that this was a tribal council that was coming back from the combined tribal council when Malcolm got voted out, and I said at the time, like, well, I was okay with this. But at some point down the road, are we just having everybody is walking around? I feel like that. Do we need to confine people to the chairs? And I think that tonight was ultimately. I don't know what this was, and I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was great TV, but in my mind, this was the craziest tribal council in the history of the show. In that it was just into like if you ever see like one of these like a fight that breaks out like in a parliament somewhere. That's like what this was.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And it's like, we've seen crazy tribals break out. I don't think we've ever seen like the game totally reform in this crazy way. I mean, maybe it didn't totally reform. I don't know.
It was the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Like, I got a name. Okay.
Yeah, it was like people were like going over here, and then they were going over there. You know who wasn't going anywhere though, which was the wildest thing to me?
Two people.
Right, Julia and Gavin were just in their seat.
That was not what I was gonna say. Because Julia was in one of the. It was Aurora, who was all the way on the left, and then
Aurora and Julia
Kelly Wentworth did not get up. And I feel like that the Kelly Wentworth thing really contributed to the confusion. There's this great conversation with David Wright, but Kelly Wentworth seemed like she wanted to still make it work with Kama, which I think sort of prevented them from being able to really jump it, because they were sort of like, oh no, Kelly, you're still on board with us? Okay, well we're cool, and this other group was mounting against Kama, the Rick Devens pilot group, and we saw that Kelly seemed like she was still on board, and it wasn't until her and David had that conversation that she ends up going back to Lesu.
That's a really great observation, that the fact that Kelly did seem to want to work with them ended up kind of screwing Kama over, because like they were sort of trying to salvage that relationship rather than, deal with all the chaos that was breaking out over here. And that's a really good observation. I mean, it's there. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to talk about Kelly and David Wright, because this was Kelly and David Wright is so much fun to me that somehow we are 9 episodes into this season. These two, I mean, we've seen in most of the pre-merge, it was David Wright talking about Kelly, and then we need to get rid of Kelly. Most of the post-merge has been Kelly talking about we need to get rid of Devens, we need to get rid of David Wright, and somehow that this on again, off again, on again, off again ends up. We end the episode. They are back on again and working together somehow.
It's great. And it really is. I mean, once again, it's a testament to like why these people should have been voted out a long time ago, right? It's like for two reasons, right? Like one, they're very aware of the politics around them. I mean, we saw how incredibly hyper-attuned.
Both of them talked about how I thought that their returning player advantages really showed up in this episode tonight. Both of them talked about how that they could read the writing on the wall, that the new players were not getting anything over on them tonight.
Yeah, I think Heather. I think on Twitter, Heather. I think it was Heather said that Kelly has like basically been the vote target 4 times, so she knows. Short of Idol should have been voted out 4 times, so she knows what it feels like when she's about to be the vote target. And I think that's really smart. Like you don't know what it feels like until it is you.
Yes.
And then like it's a feeling that once you've had it, you will never forget it.
And this is a really great point, because I was thinking about this, because to me, the third returning player in the game is Rick Devens, because he has been that person who has known it was him. He was voted out. He had time to think about it, and now here he is. He has this opportunity. He's returned to the game, and then at this tribal council, things are not going in his favor, and he has the presence of mind to really turn this whole vote around. And one of these other, first-time players who has not yet been voted out of the game, I don't think that any of them could have pulled something like this off.
Yeah, I agree. And again, like, it's a reason these people should have been voted out, but it's also really fun to see. And that just kind of like self-possession, when like all of this chaos is happening around them, and all of them are able to really turn that vote. I mean, Rick's back and forth with Julia was phenomenal. Just the way that everything she said, he turned it around. It was like, yes. And that is the reason why we need to ally. I also want to talk about how Julia was uniquely bad. And I do think that she had a couple of opportunities at that tribal council where she could have righted the ship, and she just like sort of made her situation worse. It seemed like every time Rick specifically challenged her and was like, we got these commas over here, they're running the show, we can all ally together. Julia had a couple of opportunities where she could have said, like, Rick, like, she could have, instead, rather than like denigrating Rick and sort of dismissing him, she could have like said something really positive to her allies. She could have been like, I am with the people I'm with, and we have a plan, and we're moving forward. And like, I have trust with those people. I have loyalty. And instead she kind of like, waved her finger at Rick and kind of insulted him. And it just showed more of the arrogance that her allies were already worried about.
Well, I think that Rick was really good. She did try to say at one point, like, oh, look, there's just a lot of plans that you're not involved in, which sort of like only motivated him more. Like, well, if there's a lot of plans I'm not involved in, then maybe this is all the more reason I need to be this. But when she said the worst was when she said to him that, Rick, you're such a passenger.
You're a passenger.
He's like,
Rick
hey,
Evans.
I think I'm a pilot right now. I think I just put in the GPS.
But that was awesome.
And Julia really tried to go after Aurora. So Aurora spilled the beans, and I don't know if something got cut out, because also Rick mentioned, I think Aurora just told us, but I was with War Dog. I'm like, I have no idea what Aurora is talking about when she spoke. Yeah. Like, I don't know how that was the inciting incident.
I didn't think, I mean, she was more like, it seemed like she was more being like, you guys, like Aurora said, like, you guys are really disjointed. Aurora's point was like, we are nervous, just as you are nervous about the commas, we are nervous about the lessons.
And then she also said about like, and she's like, yeah, there's a shark and a minnow, but maybe there's a lot of other factors that are going on that are contributing into that. And it seemed like that was what Rick, but that doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I also like had trouble parsing that.
I was with War Dog. I have no idea what's going on right now, Jeff.
Well, I liked how Jeff immediately punted it. He was like, Jeff had no response. So he was like, let's let someone else take this. One thing I wanted to say about, you mentioned how Julia said there are many plans, I actually thought that was really bad. That wasn't a good way of being like, there are many plans. To say there are many plans, like, that makes everyone nervous, because for everyone else, there's one plan. And she's like, oh, there are many plans. If one of my allies says there are many plans, I'm like, I only know about one. Yeah. What are all your other plans? Like, that makes me worried.
I did feel like that Julia was going out in this episode, and I wrote it in my notes when I was watching, that there's a point like 10 minutes into the episode, and the timing is all off on this episode, but Julie mentions that she's like, well, Julia is the one that's running everything. And I think that's a Survivor tell that we should be on the lookout for. When a person from out of nowhere, we are suddenly told is running everything. And it happened last week with Eric. It was like, oh, Ron and Eric are running. Like, Eric? What? I mean, if we come out next week and somebody's like, well, Lauren is running the show, mark my words.
It was like Carl.
Yeah.
Remember, like Carl?
Yeah. Carl is running the show. Yeah. If somebody who is it's completely out of left field that somebody is running the show, that person is going home.
Yeah. Probably so. But it probably, I mean, in the case of Julia and Gavin, like, it did make sense that there would be this perception, that they were running things. I was surprised that Aurora was the initial target. That I think War Dog brought up Aurora. Why do you think they did that? That was the case.
I think that she was somebody who was on the outside. I mean, in some ways, I think that this crazy vote tonight sort of ended up just defaulting to what we've talked about with these merge votes of the person that everybody is just willing to sacrifice, much like with Big Wendy. I think that Julia did not ultimately have a tight ally left, and maybe Julie and Ron were her tightest allies prior prior to this. And so after making that flip, she was somebody who was deemed expendable. And ultimately, Gavin and Victoria, I believe, also were people that voted against Julia at this tribal council.
Yeah, and and actually Victoria's already tweeted about this, just to say, and no spoilers here. Like, it was pretty clear that this was my only opportunity to flip.
And I have to give Victoria credit here at this.
Yeah, she was right over there.
She was right over there. And I will say, to her credit, one of the things that she has done really well, and she had that confessional earlier in the season where she said, like, nobody should trust me. I am not loyal. Nobody should trust me. She has moved herself to wherever the numbers are going. She is a person who is like, oh, okay, numbers are going here. Numbers are going here. She ends up getting back on the right side of the vote, and I think is probably going to be the person who's going to be able to get away from this car wreck the easiest.
I was surprised that no one considered her. I mean, I think she's playing the best game of all the commas. I guess that's at this point, it's like, that's a low bar.
Yeah. The comma crew, it was, they probably peaked at voting Joe.
Yeah, although you could argue that voting out Joe kind of laid the seeds of voting out, Eric last week, which more seeds tonight. So. Really, I still stand by. If they had just voted for Kelly at the merge, everything would have been fine for the commas. Like, that's where it all went wrong. That's where they in the words of James, like, that's where they took the apple.
Yeah,
and also got.
Yeah, I will give you that. I loved the circular firing squad from that one, but Kelly probably the bigger threat than Joe.
Yeah, no, it was really fun to watch, and but ended up sort of, I think, sowing distrust among that alliance.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about Gavin tonight, because we saw that he was somebody who I think that he was too inflexible about his plan. It was almost like that. He won immunity this round, but he had his sights set on David Wright so bad. He was so dug in on being the hero of being the person to slay the dragon that was David Wright. And I think that
I've been there.
Yes. I think that was costly.
Yeah, I agree, because it created like some, there was that moment where I think it was, maybe it was Julie, was saying like, hey, no one ever came and talked to me. Or no, it was Rick was saying like, we were waiting to hear from Gavin and we never heard from him. And he was like, I was running, I had 100 other things. My schedule was packed that day. And I think that it's like, to your point at the very start of the show, like, they're not being able to kind of really get on the same page ended up kind of having a ripple effect, where as a result, there were just so many different plans that they were not able to finesse. And I agree, like, but you think they should have stuck with Wentworth and Lauren and War Dog, so they should have gone for David. Like, Gavin is right.
I think that he was just very dug in on that, to the point where then I think that opened the doors for either that's the plan, but I think that also then that sort of contributed to the wishy-washiness of what was going on, that basically if his allies are not on board with that, he's got to either give that up or get his allies on board with it, because then I think that created a dynamic where, David and Devins really felt isolated. We saw them, even though David voted with Lesu, it seemed like that David was back more with Devins this week and with Ron and with Julie this week than he was last week when he voted against them.
Yeah. By the way, I just got confirmation from that Victoria and Julia have confirmed that Kelly was the original target.
Yes.
So you were right about that, and that makes sense too. I believe.
Yeah, and maybe for Julia, that where Gavin was like envisioning himself as the person who took down David Wright, in the same way Victoria was the person that took down Aubrey, where Julia felt like, okay, I will be the one to slay Kelly Wentworth.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that was the case.
I will have that head on a pike.
Yeah, I think everyone is really into their getting the credit for their big move.
Big game hunting.
And yeah, it really is. It really is, and it makes sense that would cause some conflict between Gavin and Julia, because obviously if they're now thinking of themselves as this new voting bloc or alliance, they have to compete against each other at the same time they're competing against the bigger group.
So,
and that's also why you want to delay that moment when your group takes power, is because you don't want to compete against your group until right at the end.
Okay. So, Steven, this was a interestingly formatted episode also, because we ended up where we had the immunity challenge about 10 minutes into the episode.
Yeah.
Then we were at Tribal Council going into, usually we go to Tribal Council after the fourth act break, around you go into commercial around 8:45. And then we end up having just the one segment at Tribal Council, two segments at Tribal Council tonight.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy the change in the format?
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but was this just a day of island time?
So I don't know that maybe we will find out that answer. If there was a reward challenge, did they skip it, or did they just happen to have no reward challenge on this cycle? And maybe that's one of the reasons why we had such a crazy Tribal Council, where if this is like the next day or 2 days after the last Tribal Council, maybe that there was still so much fallout after the previous big move that was made.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense that there's so many unresolved things. It actually, if it is just a day of time, it makes sense why these guys would not have had the chance to, and I think that's something we don't talk about enough, is just the logistics of this. They don't have an opportunity to get Ron and Julie to feel better about things, because there's no time. There's just no time. If you come back from Tribal Council the next morning, you have an immunity challenge. Then suddenly it's Tribal Council again. You don't have the time to reassure your allies, to get on the same page of the plans. And if that was the case, I'm sure that's a lot of why this craziness happened tonight. I
wanted to talk about the long-term impact of what we saw tonight. Do you think that moving forward now, I don't know if in time for season 39, perhaps in time for season 40, will tonight's Tribal Council be one that changes the paradigm, Steven?
Well, first of all, we have to talk about the history of tonight's Tribal Council, and we can't do that without talking about J.T. Thomas, the first person to ever get up and cross the room in Survivor Game Changers, really revolutionizing Survivor Tribal Councils.
Nobody had ever done that before? Nobody had ever crossed party lines?
Well, no one had ever gotten up out of their seat and walked across the room before. Of course, whispering had broken out. There'd been leaning, but no one had ever stood up and walked across the room. And with those bold steps, J.T. Thomas laid out an entire trajectory of Survivor history. So really, hats off as always to J.T. Thomas.
Okay. And so now here we are in the, everybody get up, and you are now free to move about the cabin, whether you're a pilot or a passenger. So do you think that that's
good? That was really good.
Do you think that we will see more of this in Survivor's future?
You have speculated that at some point they're going to have to reel it in a little bit. I'm sure that it's like when you're the third person asking for a nickname, Jeff's going to be no more nicknames. And I think that it's probably a point, and maybe in every season, where he'll be like, guys, back in the seats.
Yeah. Well, what do they do? I mean, I feel like that they do like the live Tribal Council, and this was the livest. So is this a problem? Is this an issue? I mean, and what is the downside to this?
Yeah, I think the downside is if it happens all the time, it starts to feel formulaic. I would guess that just because of how Survivor works, the contestants for the most part will not want this to happen. You want your plans pretty much locked up before you go to Tribal Council. So I think, it will always be a little bit of an anomaly, which will always make it a little bit more fun. Of course, I think the players were, the players are becoming more and more camera whorish. And so I think that everyone sees the huge response these things have gotten. I would imagine that some future, big flamboyant character, person, whatever we call them, contestant, will do this in the future. Now, what about you? What about you, Rob? I know that you are not a huge fan of this as a rule. You worry that there's too much whispering.
Yeah, I do think that it is confusing. Like, I really would love to just get the opinion of somebody like my mom, who, I know she was just really, just thrown for a loop this week with Joe and Sierra getting engaged. But for somebody who does not follow this as closely as we do and our listeners do, are they just like, I don't even know what I watched tonight?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just like, it's like part of this like confusion era of Survivor where like so much is going on. It's just like things are coming at me on the screen and it's exciting, but like, can I actually like track the logic of it? And I think, tonight you pretty much could, but I do think that's the danger.
Or is there enough there that the person who is sort of, barely following what's going on the show says, oh, I guess, Julia blew it. And then everybody voted her out.
I think that's probably how it. Like I said, it's like exciting in the moment, and you like your big takeaway is like Rick turned things around, Julia blew it, and Julia went home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wikipedia apparently has confirmed that Eric went out on day 22, Julia went out on day 23. That means it was one day. That's crazy. Like that's not a lot of time to just fix things after a big move.
Okay. All right. We're gonna take your questions as we continue. Yes.
We got to talk about Exile or Edge of Extinction.
Okay, well, I didn't know there was much to talk about there today.
No, not really.
Okay.
But Eric almost quit.
I mean, I guess.
He did. Yeah.
I guess.
But he's making his kids proud.
He's going to make his kids proud. He's going to tell them about the time that Chris caught a big stingray.
Caught a stingray.
Yeah. I did love when he was talking about, he was like doing his monologue, talking about how hard it is. And in the midst of it, Reem was like, dude, you don't even know how hard it was when I was the only one here. I had to read that note. And it was like, what? And I was like, only one, dude.
Yeah.
I did love that. Nobody's had a harder time on Extinction than Reem.
Yeah.
And she'll never raise that mast.
No.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We're going to take your questions here tonight, live, hashtag RHAP as we talk through this. But, Steven, tonight we saw David Wright and Rick Devens come together and play the Hidden Immunity Idol. And David Wright said upon playing the Hidden Immunity Idol, like, hey, nothing like a little bit of insurance at a tribal council. And, of course, nobody knows that better than our friends over at AIS, the auto insurance specialist, who can help you, or somebody that drives a car, rather, somebody who is paying too much in car insurance, and make sure that they're not blowing it like some of the common members did at this tribal council, and they could be saving a lot of money on their car insurance using the smart quote technology from AIS. All you need to do is head on over to aisinsurance.com/Rob, and you will just give them your driving information, your vehicle information, and they will go to work on all the different carriers and the coverage that you want. And you may just find out that your insurance company has been jacking up the rates on you. You had the plane on autopilot. They were jacking up the rates. Take back control of your insurance payments. Don't make another payment until you talk to AIS. Call 1-800-777-4AIS or go to aisinsurance.com. Super easy way to start saving a lot of money potentially on your car insurance, Steven.
That sounds like a great deal.
Yeah, it could be. You don't.
I'm really impressed with how you're able to weave the metaphors in. It's really, is it on the fly or do you think about it in advance?
Think about it a little bit in advance.
Yeah, this was a great one with the insurance and David with the idol and the insurance.
I listened for it. I listened for it. Like, aha. Okay.
Oh.
All right, Steven.
Yeah.
Let's take our first question here from Twitter.
All right, Fiona wants to know, in what ways did the returning players not on Extinction Island succeed compared to those who are? This is a great question. We talked about it a little bit. What do you think, Rob?
So I really think that the biggest thing that has worked for David Wright and Kelly Wentworth, and I do not think that this was by design, but the fact that they have not seemed united, where Joe and Aubrey were looked at as a big threat because that they were sort of a united front, where that Kelly and David have both appeared vulnerable. And now I think it would be great if we found out that after the season, David Wright and Kelly Wentworth were like, oh my God, we're best friends. We faked this the whole time. We're going to be on The Amazing Race together. But that would be something.
I'm here for that team, by the way. Amazing Race, if you're listening, like that is a reason to do another reality season.
Yes. So, but the fact that they have both been on each other's radar and both sort of have been opportunities, and the dysfunction of Lesu was brought up quite a bit tonight. That hey, it looks like they're vulnerable. It looks like you could take a shot on David Wright. Looks like you could take a shot on Kelly Wentworth. It's very appetizing, but then sometimes they get back together and vote together.
Yeah, it's if they were together. And they were working together, the threat would be so huge that there's no question that they would have been voted out. But the fact that it's like there's a debate between them, and like each has its different merits, and that itself causes strife. I mean, we saw that tonight. There was strife caused in that Comma alliance because they couldn't decide which of these two threats to take out. If they were together, it would be a no-brainer. And P.S. Now the 5 Lesus have the same numbers as the 5 Commas.
Okay. All right. Steven, let's take one from Faux David and Devins use their idol. Do you think that this was a good idea? Because in the end, it will stop any tension in the future that might have arose out of David and Devins both having half an idol. They can be free agents now. Okay, so for David and Devins, it was compared to the baby. Yes, this is as many of us had speculated or made that analogy before David Wright does it on the show. So,
are you saying David stole your material?
No, I'm saying we were all on the same page with that. So do you think, does the relationship with David and Devins grow stronger without this idol tying them together? Or do you think that now they could potentially go their separate ways?
I thought it was really cool in the episode when David was like, I think it's me. And, I think every one of us probably had the thought like Devins is going to be like, no, I think it's me. But actually Devins was like, yeah, it's you. That's such a rare thing for someone to be so both aware of the tenor and also generous with the superpower. And I do think like having played it on David will make them strong. I don't think necessarily like being free from the idol will make them stronger. I mean, that idol forced them to work together even when they were sort of disagreeing. But I think now that they've played it together, that's really healed whatever rift there was.
It was nice to then see an idol played on David Wright.
Yeah. It was great. Right. See someone who's played him on others. You're right. And of course it didn't matter, but I think we can both agree that if you're going to play an idol, this is the tribal council to do it.
Okay. All right. We surprised Kelly didn't play her idol. Kelly and Lauren, boy, they've got nerves of steel.
Nerves of steel. Yeah.
Okay. David Oakley.
All right. David Oakley wants to know, where should Gavin and Victoria go from here?
Victoria's going to go where the numbers are. I'm pretty convinced of that. Gavin could be in trouble. Gavin and Aurora, I think, are two people that I'd be worried about next.
But it's the same. It's like the ping pong effect, right? Like the people at this, you're right. Like Survivor 38, very late in the game, the people who people go for are the people who have power, and that's why last week after the Commas took power, suddenly they were the targets. Now we see Julia going home. So who's? I mean, I would actually be surprised if it were someone like in an alliance that now no longer has power. I mean, who are the power players now who are going to be the new targets?
Well, I just wonder if the group that came together on this vote ultimately, where is that thing going to, fracture again? So, I mean, could they go a vote? Like, I don't think that Gavin and Aurora go out back to back, but I could see one of them going out Gavin, potentially.
Or Aurora.
Especially Gavin coming off an immunity win, Aurora an immunity win the week before. So, I could definitely see it being one of the two.
Yeah. I feel good about Julie. No one's going to vote for Julie right now. And now that I've said that, she'll be gone and I'll have that clip. But I feel good about that.
You feel good about Julie as the next boot or to win?
Oh, to just not be the next boot.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So,
don't you think?
You're saying that she's the one person that will not get voted out next.
I see her as being pretty safe the next vote. I mean, but again, now that I've said that, I'm really nervous.
Okay. Yeah, I think she's I think she's safe. I don't see people looking at her as one of the bigger targets right now. Let's go to Tiffany.
All right, Tiffany wants to know: do you guys think Jeff should let them talk for that long at Tribal? I feel like no. I feel like no, despite it being entertaining, especially if the vote was not going to be all on Julia beforehand.
No, I mean, I think you should, let them keep talking until it stops being interesting or exciting. I just think that, we are on that slippery slope. I don't know what the bottom looks like.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's only a problem when it does become repetitive, and so far it's been really exciting. I think everyone was super excited about the Tribal tonight.
Yeah. I mean, does every Tribal Council then just become a scrum from they sit down, Jeff says, all right, Tribal Council, and everybody's just like, it's a melee.
Yeah, that would be that wouldn't be fun. But again, like it's fun when it's like rare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Steven, let's take one from Thomas.
All right. You should read this one. Go ahead. I don't want to take all the questions.
So did Rick Devins just get the Lesu gang back together? Tribal was a huge 360 for him. Are we sure 360?
No. Take a lesson. Remember, it's as Coach Wade says, it's 180.
180. It was a 180 for him. So, Steven, did Rick Devins get the fishy tonight?
Oh, yeah. Rick Devins got the fishy.
Okay. Good for Rick Devins.
I almost gave another fishy to JT, but I thought I'm going to get in trouble.
That's you're owning your haters at that point. Okay. Steven, let's do a couple more questions here.
All right. John Marsalis wants to know, people are talking best Tribal ever. Not even close. The best Tribals have been when everyone stays on their stumps and we get to hear all the interactions instead of watching.
Okay, John is out. I don't think this was the best Tribal Council ever, but I think that in my mind, this was the most out of control Tribal Council ever.
Yeah, it's not necessarily best. It's exciting, and there's something where for most Tribals, everyone is kind of being evasive with their answers, right?
Yeah.
And here it's just like you're really seeing that raw strategy. I think that's.
Let me make an analogy here for you as a huge sports fan. For you, Steven, it's almost like the fighting in hockey. I think if this, if it turns into all fighting, that's bad. And so, but they don't want to get rid of fighting. So, they got to sort of like figure out a way to, have there be fights break out sometimes in the hockey game, but it's just enough to, like, oh, fight. Oh, okay. Somebody got up. Okay. All right. Steven, what about Smash Film? They have, or they had to have a reward challenge, right? Has Survivor ever not had a reward challenge? Yeah, it seems like that there was no reward challenge. It seems like that based on the information that we have, it looks like that there was, tribals on back-to-back days.
Yeah. And if that's the case, they've got the immunity challenge in the morning, presumably, or the early afternoon, and then the tribal at night. And they obviously want to give people time to strategize. So, yeah, I mean, really, again, for not much time for poor Gavin and Julia. And it does make me feel a little bit worse for them, the fact that they really just were not in a position to kind of solidify their plan.
And I would say kudos to the producers if they cut a reward challenge because we had such good stuff, but it sounds like that they just lucked out. There wasn't one there. Okay, Jack says, what did Rick, Kelly, and David mean by we'll talk after the vote? Doesn't that totally isolate the Kama sheep who voted with them? I mean, I don't think that that we'll talk was necessarily so exclusive.
Yeah. And also, I mean, you can really tell that Julie was not making a strategic choice here. She was just angry, right? And she was like, I don't feel safe. I want to screw you guys over. Like it was.
But I also think she wanted to feel safe.
Oh, yeah, right. But it wasn't necessarily like, this is my optimal move. Who do you think is in the best spot here? Like if you had to pick based on this group, a winner. I mean, obviously Reem is in the
I think I might be back on Rick Devins this week.
Yeah. I like Rick. I kind of think Kelly's in a great spot though. Like I never, like she's the first time I was like, Kelly could really win this thing.
I know. I started feeling that way after last week too. And she still has an idol.
Yeah. She still is an idol. She's really strong in immunity challenge, but not so strong that is she strong in immunity challenge? I have this in my head that she's strong in immunity challenges, but I don't think she's ever won one.
I think if it's the right challenge.
Oh, I'm sorry. She won 2 in Cambodia, right?
She's feisty.
Yeah. So, sorry. So I think Kelly, and she's got Lauren in her pocket. If this Lesu group manages to stick together, she's kind of in the catbird seat because she's kind of she's at the center of the dominant group. Right? She's the link between War Dog and Lauren. and she's got an idol, and she's good in challenges, and War Dog is terrible in challenges. So I think that
and she'll win in that final 3.
Yeah, unless Joe comes back, right? And then Joe wins. Wouldn't that be something if it's like all this craziness plays out, and then Joe just like walks in, sits down, and wins the game?
Sup? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, oh wow, Joe, he did it. Okay. All right.
It would be the greatest testament ever to just how random, like how the winner is.
Yeah. It's just one big microcosm of the world, Stephen.
That's it. You can struggle every day, make amazing decisions along the way,
Yep.
and some beautiful guy with his gorgeous ponytail just walks in and takes all whatever.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about what's coming up here on Rob Has a Podcast, of course. News AF, talking about Cranch. Stephen, you in or out on Cranch?
Wow, this is the first I'm hearing about it. It's
Well, you
really
can hear more
exciting.
about it on News AF this week with Danny and Tyson. Amazing Race 31. Stephen, did you know that they were doing a reality star Amazing Race? Did you know about that?
You know what? I actually had heard about
You heard
it.
about
Rob, had
that
you
at
heard
some
about
point?
it?
Yeah. So cast preview is up where Jessica Lee.
I have no chill. I'm just going to say it.
Okay.
No. We were asked. I couldn't do it because of my wedding, and Rob also was very busy. But we were asked. We had to say no. So you're welcome, Brett and Chris.
Amazing Race 31 cast preview. Jessica Leese, Dan Heaton, Mike Bloom. Check it out over on Rob's website, .com. And no regrets, right, Stephen?
No regrets.
All right.
Definitely not.
Kevin Martin was on with Taryn talking Big Brother Canada 7. Check out what the Big Brother Canada 5 champ had to say about what's going on. Always great to hear from that Kevin, Robert, Martin. Thursday morning update with Taryn coming up, so be on the lookout for that as well. 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific. And then, Thursday eviction recap. Who's going home next on Big Brother Canada 7? Check that out. And I'm scheduled to be there. Going to talk to T-Bird
cool.
early. So, Stephen, a treat for you tomorrow night on the Big Brother Canada eviction recap. T-Bird will be my guest tomorrow. Survivor at robswebsite.com. Get your questions in for T-Bird coming up. Oh, Shannon Gates is going to be on the B&B this week. We're all in for a treat. What does Shannon Gates think about this wild week in Survivor? She'll be there with Mike and Liana. And then why did Julia lose? I'm sure it'll be a good one again with David and Jessica on why blank lost. And Eric Stein, let's pick a picture that Eric Stein likes for that he likes it when we use a recent picture.
Is that the one?
That's not the one. That's not the one. He likes it when we use a recent picture for Eric Stein.
The Spring of Stein.
Coming up this weekend. Very excited about all that. Wiggle Room as well. Coming up, get your wand-offs in with Josh as we break down this wild week in Survivor. And don't forget the tabulator. We need him to count up all these votes at this tribal council. He'll be my guest on This Week in Survivor as well. Boy, thank goodness a lot happened in this episode with all these podcasts, Stephen.
Oh my God! You got to fill all this time. What if it's a boring?
God forbid. I mean, I stay up at night worried about if this is going to be a boring episode. Yeah. All right. Of course, all this podcasting is made possible by the great people who are the patrons of Rob Has a Podcast. robhasawebsite.com/patron to find out more about everything that we're doing. Get access to our patron-only podcast feed and all of the benefits of being a part of our Rob Has a Podcast patron community. That's all at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Just a reminder, 1 week from tonight, we will be together in Philadelphia for our live show, our season tradition to do a live show.
That's going to be so fun.
We'll be in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania at a sold-out show, and very excited about that. My goal is to bring you guys that show live, but we may have to record it live based on, or record it and then upload it after the fact. So I hope to get you guys more information on that next Wednesday night, but you can check Steven and I out live tonight. We're going to be in the next couple of minutes switching on over to fancred.com. Get the app and you can get your phone out and call in, and you yourself could be talking to Steven and I and asking your questions, talking about what went wrong for comma tonight.
Oh, this will be fun. I'm really looking forward to this.
This will be fun. You could tell Steven, oh my God, everything you say is right. Steven, you're wrong. and get served by Steven Fishback.
Like we're gonna have a dance battle. I like that.
All right, that's all coming up. So get on the app. We're gonna be switching over there for our first ever KIA post game show over on FanCred. Okay, thanks so much to Scott St. Pierre behind the scenes. Steven, anything else?
Check out paraphrasepodcast.com. It's the same one that I had up last week. But if you haven't listened, it's a good one.
All right. Be on the lookout for that. And thanks for joining us.
No, you don't have to be on the lookout. It's there already. You can just go right now.
Okay, well, go there right now and go check it out. Okay? All right. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.